without a world government. How many of you think that we can get, let's say he's right about it. How many of you here think we can get a world government, meaning either change the United Nations into a world government, or the Earth Federation becomes the world government in 10 years?
Yes, I'm the first to support it.
In 10.
10 years, 20 years.
How many of you think it's going to take 20 to 40 years? How many of you think never?
For the United Nations?
No, to switch to world government. Change the
Can you say,
global government.
okay, but not necessarily the United Nations, it could be
It,
another body.
it may not be the United Nations if they refuse to change. So, all right, so that's the warm-up. There are people that think it's hopeless, that there will never be world unity. That's a psychological hang-up. I'm a psychologist, so if you need to deal with me, let's do a short meditation. And for our purposes, what that amounts to is you may close your eyes if you like, and just a moment, a minute or so of silence. Go anywhere you want in your mind. And you can come on back to the room, and we'll get started. Glenn should. I'm going to make a few remarks about the Earth Constitution, the Earth Federation movement, then I'm going to turn it over to you and Eugenia and Peter, okay?
Okay.
I became aware of the Earth Constitution when I was doing radio in San Francisco, and a reader sent me some material from the World Constitution Parliament Association, which sat on my desk for 6 months. And one day I started reading it. In the back of my mind, I've been worried about war and nuclear weapons and all that stuff. I started reading this Constitution, and all of a sudden my mind went, I said, wait a minute, there might be a way to get rid of nuclear weapons. In my college career, political science, they didn't talk about world government or any of this stuff. I guess it was considered unrealistic. All right, so that's where the Earth Constitution came in for me. I got hooked on it, went to a provisional world parliament down in Miami Beach, Florida. I don't do well anymore. So a bunch of visionaries, well before I came along, or Glenn or Eugenia, drafted this Constitution. So Glenn and Eugenia will fill you in on that, but world legislation, the question will come up. People ask me, well, what about some of these dictatorship countries? Should they be allowed in the Federation? What about undemocratic countries like the United States? Should they be allowed in the Federation? And Eugenia has worked on some legislation that could gradually allow these outlaw nations, rogue nations, and that's another question that came up. Should we allow rogue nations into the new Earth Federation or to the new UN? I could name some of the rogue nations if you like. We could take a trip to Israel. We could go to the United States, Russia, China, take you to Saudi Arabia. Okay, so that's the Earth Constitution. I consider it it's a geopolitical instrument. I consider it the heart and soul of the Earth Federation movement. But I take it a little further. I see it as a spiritual document. a moral and an ethical document. Because if you go into it, it's kind of like, Thomas Jefferson extracted everything he thought Jesus said into the Jefferson Bible. And those of you here from Virginia know about Thomas Jefferson. But in that Earth Constitution, there are a lot of the principles that Jesus would preach. Right to health care. He didn't charge. Okay. Just about done. Earth Federation movement. Whether or not you know it, you're already in the Earth Federation movement. You're in it, number one, because just by being born on planet Earth, you're automatically a world citizen. So that's number one. Number two, most of what most of you here are doing already, somewhere in that Earth Constitution, it fits. The intentional communities are a lot of things you're doing working with the economic issues and so on fit into the Bill of Rights of the Earth Constitution. The idea of the culture of peace. The Earth Federation movement, we're very non-military. Now, I happen to disagree with that to some degree, but I'm an expert on sociopaths and psychopaths. So I don't know if we can deal with these problems with a non-military police force. So it's an area of disagreement at this point. Nevertheless, our intention is nonviolence. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, that kind of approach. So what the Earth Federation movement, if you like what we're doing and think it's a smart strategic move, I think it's the only move if we're going to get rid of nuclear weapons. Psychologically, it's pretty simple. Secrecy breeds paranoia, so they arm, build the nuclear weapons. Openness builds trust. In a World Federal Union, we have openness. There won't be any secret bombs being built anywhere. So what would be helpful to us is if you like what we're doing in your work, if you either do a little bit of study of the Earth Constitution among your organization, or if you just mention us in your cause that you're part of the Earth Federation movement, something like that. Just use the name will help kind of spread the word, because part of what we need to do is popularize this, because the day will come when the general population will have to vote whether or not they want to get rid of nuclear weapons, whether or not they want world peace. There are a lot of people that don't want world peace because it's good for business. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Martin. Thank you.
Josiah Eck here just wants to make an announcement.
I downloaded Glenn's brilliant book about the Earth Constitution, history, documents, and historical foundations, and I did it with Audacity, and if you have like a SD card or a thumb drive, I'd be happy to upload it to your computer or anything. So.
And Josiah and his brother Jacob have one of the tables over in the foyer to Washington Hall, right? It's called the Earth Federation Upload Table, so you can stop by there, and they'll be also handing out copies of my book that I'm offering to you for free if you agree to read it and review it, right? And send your review to my publisher, and we don't want blurbs, we want feedback, we want real honest feedback about it. So thank you, Josiah. So we were just talking with Dr. Roger Cotilla, who literally is an expert in psychopaths. He's a psychologist who worked in the prison system in California for many years, counseling prisoners and so on. And we have with us Peter Graves Goodman. Where's Peter?
Right here.
Okay, Roger's a vice president of WCPA, World Constitution and Parliament Association, and Peter is as well. He lives in Miami, Roger lives in San Francisco, and Eugenia Allman is Secretary General of the World Constitution and Parliament Association. She lives in Atlanta, and I live here in Radford. So I want to get a sense of how much you know about the Earth Constitution. We talked about it a little bit. I talked about it on Friday, right, Eugenia and I, in our presentation, right? And we talked about the holism of the Constitution. We quoted a number of passages from the preamble, you might remember. The preamble says, the principle of unity and diversity is the basis for a new age when peace shall prevail and war shall be outlawed and the earth's resources shall be used by all without discrimination. And the people who wrote that preamble embodied those principles into the Constitution itself. Right? So the Constitution is designed so that the resources of the earth are not appropriated any longer by the global north, right, or the imperial nations. It's literally for everybody, right, and it's designed to ensure sustainability, environmental sustainability, which requires knowledge, right? There are whole institutes within the Earth Constitution which will monitor the health of the earth, which will monitor the forests, which will monitor the oceans, and so on. We need to have knowledge about what's happening with our earth so that we can make sure that the ecosystem is balanced and healthy and sustainable for the future. So we talked about those things a little bit on yesterday, on Friday. And then we looked at also, if you might remember, at Article 1 of the Earth Constitution, which gives the broad functions for the Earth Federation. And there are 6 broad functions. The first 5 are, as I presented at the time, are those things that are beyond the scope of nation states. Right? So the first function is to eliminate war and disarm the world. Right? There's no nation on earth or any treaty of nations that can eliminate war and secure disarmament for the world. Disarmament means the manufacture of weapons of war is illegal. Right? The transport of weapons of war is illegal. Not just the deployment or the maintaining of armies, but the whole process. Let's face it, basically it is a criminal process. There's big organizations making billions of dollars off of this, but
Military industrial complex.
yeah. We went over those a little bit yesterday. The second principle, broad function, is to secure human rights for everyone on earth. And again, this is something, despite all those UN conventions on human rights remain violated. And there are lots of scholars who have written why these conventions are not effective. Right? And if you boil down all the reasons that these scholars are giving, it has to do with the structure of sovereign nations. Sovereign nations put their economy first and their prestige in the world first and what they call their national interest first, which is often military and not human rights. Right? And the third thing is to regulate global processes, global transportation, interactions, so that the world remains a free place and a place of equitability to use the fundamental resources of the world for the benefit of everybody rather than the benefit of the few who can pay. And one of the things that will obviously be done right away is to keep the oil and the fossil fuels in the ground. If we want a sustainable future, we can't pump those out of the ground. So the World Federation will have control over the main fossil fuels of the world so that they're no longer under private enterprise control, which is going to yeah.
Conceptually, even and linguistically, the human language we need to understand to change. they're not really fuels. And to think of the hydrocarbons in the ground and elsewhere as fuels is terminology and misconception that is throwing us off.
All right.
What would you call them?
They're hydrocarbons and they're resources, but if we're burning them, there's not enough oxygen in the air or in the ground to be replenished. I mean, when we combust them with that, I won't go into this at too much length, but when we combust the hydrocarbons into the reaction process and we remove the capacity of the life systems of Earth to replenish it at the same time that we're doing the combustion.
Okay, so we'll finish with the
Yeah.
And so that is part of the responsibility of the Earth Federation. You can't leave that up to nations. Nations are, Saudi Arabia is not going to stop pumping oil, if they have a choice. And also, the Earth Constitution insists that the environment of the world needs to be sustainable and protected. Right? And so the job of the World Federation will be to monitor the environment, and the World Parliament will pass laws so that everybody's on the same page. A treaty, they've tried it since 1992. Right? In 2002, the next environmental conference came along in Johannesburg, South Africa, and they all agreed they had failed. Right? They had failed to cut down because nation states are not going to do that on their own. And so the final principle in the Article 1 is that the Earth Federation government is responsible for all those issues and problems that are beyond the scope of nation states. We're on this planet. We're on this planet together. All of us are in this mess together, and there's no organization, there's no government, there's no representation for the needs that we all have together. Right? That we all together we all have a need for an ecologically sustainable future. Together we all have a need for a world without war. Right? It's draining all of us. And so all of these, together we all have a need for having our human rights protected. So right now there is no such force in the world. And so that's what we went over yesterday. What I'd like you to do is so we get a sense of how to proceed, is tell me what your thoughts and questions are regarding what we're doing and so on, and what the Constitution is.
Well, with respect to the first element of the first article and the weapons of war, it seems like the devil is in the details, right? Is my hunting rifle a weapon of war? Is my AK-47 a weapon of war? Does it have to be an Abrams tank? Like, what is being controlled in this effort to stop weapons of war from being moved around?
It's a good question. You want to answer it? Please, he wants to answer it.
This is, I think, a very good question. And the Constitution itself does not address that question of what is the weapon of war. However, the Constitution calls for the Provisional World Parliament to address it, In sessions of the Provisional World Parliament, of which there have been 13 sessions so far, the Parliament did look at this question. And we have, and I'll try to keep this brief, that in the world legislation of the Parliament, the Parliament has listed weapons of war. And yes, an Abrams tank would be a weapon of war. A bear gun would not be a weapon of war. Now, I understand that perhaps some people here are very much working with gun control organizations. However, the way that the Parliament has addressed this, our emphasis has been on military disarmament and on citizen empowerment. And a basic principle is that that if some individuals have handguns or automatic weapons, they're not for overthrowing our government, they're for upholding our government. So we have not been taking actions to take handguns or rifles or automatic weapons away from the people of the earth. And we have, in the Parliament legislation, we have specifically decided and pointed out that if the world police can't have it, I mean, if the people of Earth can't have it, then the world police can't have it. And by taking a position where the world police, when there's a civil world police force that is required to go by due process, when this helps to balance out and helps to determine what sort of arms or instruments of defense are reasonable. Is the instrument of defense an instrument of defense that will be reasonable for civil enforcement? And if it is something that would be reasonable for civil enforcement, then it's not being taken away from the citizens.
Can I answer this question just simply?
Sure.
Just simply, there's a process designed in the World Parliament to eliminate weapons of mass destruction, and that is, originally, as countries join the World Parliament and ratify the Constitution, in order to become part of the World Parliament, you have to surrender your weapons of mass destruction. But we realized, the Parliament people, the WCPA realized that a lot of these countries are not going to join if that's the prerequisite for joining the Parliament. So there is a stipulation now has been designed that can be put off for a short time, for a few years, until they can find a way to pressure the countries to get rid of their weapons of mass destruction. But there is this process that initially they couldn't join the World Parliament unless they surrendered their weapons of mass destruction, which is a pretty strong statement in itself.
This was, I think, back in 1987. This was in the Disarmament Committee, which met at Miami Beach. We'll talk about this at the next workshop, and it's actually not the policy right now that there's no surrendering under the Earth Constitution, because who's going to have weapons of mass destruction? Under the Earth Constitution, Earth Federation, no one has weapons of mass destruction. So there's not exactly surrendering. It's some other process that takes place. And we'll get and talk about that in the Parliament workshop.
May I suggest a procedure here? I'd really like to hear everyone's response to the question that you're asking, which is what questions do you want to ask? Or what issues do you want to raise, but with nobody trying to answer those issues or questions. To get a sense from the whole audience.
Yeah. Laura?
Well, when I was first learning about the document, what I found the most helpful was a good overview of the document itself. The 3 houses, the 5-person presidium. I would highly recommend that some of the basics get set forth so people get a feel for the document. Because it's a lovely, well-structured document, and the House of Counselors is the element for me that made me keep reading. So I would recommend that you guys do that.
And I would recommend that you explain which institutions of the UN would be kept into place. And so
Okay.
Glenn, there's a couple others here with potential questions.
I was going to start jotting these down, but the screen is down. I was just wondering how to put it up.
Don't worry about it.
Fred?
Yeah, it seems like whether we're talking about the destruction of the environment or the proliferation of WMD, it seems like it's so integrated and tied into the world economic system that we have today that all of those negative things are so profitable based on our current worldwide economic system. So I would be curious to know whether there have been any strategies discussed by which we can transition that economic system
It's a good point.
to get us from here to there.
This kind of relates to what you're saying. My biggest question is, what's the PR plan to get this buy-in? Particularly from people who can influence decision makers, because there are still a lot of people out there that I think would cringe at the thought of not being part of a sovereign nation, but a world government. And what I think people can be educated, but what I guess my big question is, what's the bigger plan?
Yeah, mine is kind of in the same vein. I have a lot of friends and acquaintances that are libertarian. And the thought of this world government would scare the Jesus out of them, and they would be totally against it if they look at it from the perspective that they've seen what the UN has done. And some of them are very knowledgeable about some of the bad things that the UN has done, and that turns them against the whole idea of it. So what is your PR plan to educate these people? How do we reach these people instead of going into a polarity with them?
Yeah. Others?
You know, I haven't read it, but my initial reaction is, you know, are you going to really try to get established governments to go with this? Because they're going to be against it. And so it seems to me the strategy would be to get people in these countries to go for it and not even worry about these governments, because they're not going to.
Well, this is a constitution. Is that it, or did you have? Oh, just no.
I got one more.
Okay.
I got one more.
Okay, you got one
Just
more.
because I think people are, the other big thing for me, the person who was introduced to it was, let's just say you get it done, was to prevent the bad guys from going, thank you very much for federating the earth. Now, we've got our one world order. Right? So that was another one of my initial concerns. How do you protect it once it's established from falling into the hands of the ultimate dictator?
Yeah,
or something.
in a way, that's the issue, I think, in that this whole movement toward globalization and World Trade Organization and the upcoming TPP and so on, this is the new world order of George H. Bush and the Trilateral Commission. They're planning on a world dictatorship, and so you know, this is the alternative. It's really world democracy, and we want to get that in place in the name of the people of Earth and protect it. How do we protect it? I guess we can get to all these questions.
You want to start with World Parliament?
Yeah, I want to start with
here. World Parliament, UN agencies, World Economic System, PR plan, libertarians, what to do with them.
Well, I want to add one thing to this, right? So governments are one problem, libertarians are another problem, but the people who are actually most problematic in this are the existing corporations with fantastic vested interests, which in the event that you actually look like you might succeed, will simply kill you. No, but they can certainly take out leadership of any kind of federated global organization that they feel is a significant hazard. And they have a whole different set of scruples than these other more reasonable organizations that we're talking about, which are not reasonable, by the way, but more reasonable.
Now, the Earth Constitution, right, is a way out. I mean, we have all these terrible things. It isn't just, I don't think it's just the huge corporations that'll take us out. It's the imperial nation states. In fact, we have experience in 1983. The then Secretary General of WCPA to talk to the president of Costa Rica. Right? Costa Rica has no military, they're a very peaceful country. And he went down to San Jose, stayed in a hotel, and had arranged a meeting. And he met with the then president of Costa Rica. The president loved the Constitution, loved the idea. It was already afloat in that country for various reasons. And so he said, I want to talk to my advisors and get some of them to meet with you again tomorrow. Please come back tomorrow. Right? So Philip Isley went back to his hotel. 9 o'clock the next morning, the government car did not appear to pick him up as promised. He called the government, the people he had been talking to, and said, where's the car? I have an appointment with the president. They said, we've never heard of you. We don't even know who you are. Right? And, okay, a few years in 1996, we organized the 4th session of the Provisional World Parliament in Andorra. Andorra is a little country between France and Spain in the Pyrenees Mountains. I flew into Barcelona. There was supposed to be, it's supposed to be very big. There were supposed to be buses to take us to Andorra. It's about 3.5 hours drive. No buses. Right? We had reserved a giant conference hotel. Right? At that time, we had a lot of money, and we had reserved this hotel. We had sent $26,000 worth of materials to the hotel for the conference, packets and so on. So I rented a car, no buses, so I rented a car and drove up got to the hotel. This is the day before the Parliament was supposed to start, right? A whole year in organization, they said it's been canceled. Oh, it's been canceled. And I said, that's impossible. We sent all this material. And he said, we have this phone number. And I called the phone number. It was a motel back near Barcelona Airport. And they said, come back. Right? So I turned around and drove all the way back. And there were about 35, 45 people, like myself. I was one of the rare ones who got past the border. Right? Now, the government of Andorra, when we were organizing this, the government of Andorra was very excited about this. They said, this is a great idea. World peace, World Federation, and they offered to host a reception for us. So it was right there in the program, right? At the end of the last day of our parliament, the government of Andorra hosting a reception for us, right? Now, the day before the thing was supposed to start, the people who were back in their motel said they had gotten to the border. They had been stopped there. Plainclothes police from Andorra had photographed their passports and told them to get out of the country. They wouldn't even let them in the country. Right? No reasons have to be given. It's a sovereign nation. They don't have to explain their behavior. The same thing happened in Innsbruck, Austria, and in the island of Malta in the Mediterranean with things that were organized. Right? It isn't just the corporations. Right?
Not just.
But the imperial nation states don't want this to happen either. We think we don't know, but we think it's probably the United States that's behind all of this. Yeah. So, but here's what we're trying. This Constitution is brilliantly organized to create a world democracy, and I just want to sketch out the framework for it. Briefly for you, and then we can address all of these questions about how it can be implemented. Now, a constitution, as we just saw in the whole question about weapons and so on, a constitution is a structure for decision making, right? It provides for people ways to make laws, make decisions, have due process of law and so on. It doesn't have the details. For instance, what weapons you're allowed to have are up to the World Parliament, right? They're not in the Constitution, right? The Constitution is this beautiful structure that makes possible decision-making by the people of the earth and their representatives. And it has, the World Parliament has 3 houses to it.
You can just point over here to the wall.
I could.
The-
But I think I'll do this anyway.
Okay, good.
It has 3 houses. The House of Peoples, right? So the world is divided into 1,000 electoral districts by population. And if you want to look at a beginning of the sketch, we have worked on dividing the world on the left there. We're working on dividing those electoral districts up for the world. We're actually working on it.
And this, it's one of those things, if I may just briefly say, like opening and closing a curtain, which one is which. When we say we're dividing the world, in the same sense we're uniting the world into 1,000 districts. So the language there to understand what it is that we're doing is not divide and conquer, but it's divide and organize. And so in an overall sense, it actually gets us together to be able to coordinate.
The Constitution says that these electoral districts should conform as far as possible to existing borders of nations.
So the state governments stay functioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the governments stay functioning. This is just another.
Local governments, state governments, national governments, right? National governments stay functioning as well, right? All we're doing is adding a layer for the people of Earth, because a federal system means, as they sometimes put it, that sovereignty is shared, right? The city of Bradford here, the city council has the sovereign right to make laws, binding on all of us. Right?
For the city.
That's what I just said, for the city, yes. The state of Virginia has the sovereign right to make laws for the state of Virginia. The federal government has the sovereign right. But there's no one right now that has the sovereign right to make laws for the people of Earth. And so it's a federal system, it's shared from the local up to the, so there's 1,000 electoral districts, and there's 1,000 representatives from all over the world in the House of Peoples. The second house is the House of Nations. And so every nation will be, they will not be abolished. Nations will have 1, 2, or 3 representatives depending on their size, their population. Right? So the big nations like the United States, China, India would have 3 representatives. Small nations like Cuba and so on, Costa Rica would have 1 representative. So they will have 1, 2, or 3 chosen the way they want. They could have elections for these representatives. So it's up to those governments how they want to choose their representatives. So that.
Let Eugenia make a comment about.
Oh, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. Regarding the House of Nations, the Parliament in 2009, 2010 addressed a question of weighting in the Parliament and a question of language in the Constitution. The Constitution, the Earth Constitution itself does not define what is a nation.
Well, should a little nation with 100,000 people get 1 representative?
This is explained in the.
Oh, yes or no?
Okay, the provisions are for the tiny nations that may have only so many citizens can band together
So they
to get a representative in the House of Nations. Furthermore, it is the political groups or governing groups that join in that can constitute the nations according to the decision that was made in 2010 by the Provisional World Parliament for World Federal Distinction. That's so that 2 things. well, for three things. So that there can be not only a dozen national representatives for half of the population of the world. We felt that that weighting was maybe 12 representatives for half of the Earth's population at a national level was giving too much power to the individuals that are delegates, and not enough power and representation from the nations, from the constituencies within the nation. So what the Parliament said is that the constituent states of continental federations may ratify the Earth Constitution and come in as nations. They do not have to secede from their respective continental federations. So
Not too much
that's
You can see that Eugenia is our parliamentary expert, and she can give us the real details of these things. So the third house is the House of Councilors. They
now move on.
uh,
Because we're running short of time.
Talk about the executive really quickly.
Yeah.
Let them know the difference in how the
We've got-
executive would
Yeah,
work.
we've got, I'll talk about the UN agencies in just a moment. After we look at the four main agencies that come under this, because this is a parliamentary system, which means that the parliament, these 1,500 people or so from all over the world, from every race and religion and culture and background, they have the lawmaking capacity, right? Not like the United States, right? Or those systems in which in the US there's an executive branch, a judicial branch, and a legislative branch. And as is the case with many countries, in a world of great danger with high-speed weapons and dangerous weapons and so on, the executive branch grows all out of proportion, right? And has this capacity to dominate the other two branches, which has happened in the United States. And so there's no danger of that kind of thing. Here, there's four main agencies: the World Judiciary, the World Executive, and under the World Executive is the entire World Administration, 28 departments. And then there's the World Police and Attorney Generals. The World Attorney Generals are like the district attorneys in the United States that work with the police, right? They're the people that do the prosecution. If the police arrest someone, then they have to turn it over to the attorneys, the district attorneys, to prosecute the accused. And so these work together here. And then there's a unique house called a unique agency that's worldwide called the Ombudsman.
Yes, this is a very good thing.
And this is a watchdog agency, right? Just as, and we're talking about a federal system, which means that these agencies will have locations all over the world. It isn't that they'll be in Europe or, or North America or any place like that. There'll be agencies of the Ombudsman everywhere, just like in the United States, which is a federation, isn't it? A federation of states. Federal government, the nearest federal court is in Roanoke, not far from here. Right? In other words, the World Federation will be everywhere on the planet. It's not going to be far away. And these people's job are to be watchdogs for human rights. For human rights.
So the government can't cap my toy anymore?
Right.
Absolutely not.
And if they do, they'll end up they'll have to answer to the world police and then the world attorney general will prosecute them.
So it says that they're protecting human rights for everyone from all sources of danger. So multinational corporations will no longer be able to bribe people and exploit people in sweatshops and so on, because that violates their human rights. There's two articles, human rights in the Earth Constitution, Articles 12 and 13, right? And their job is to see that these are protected and implemented.
So what is the process of the ombudsman who, somebody comes to him and says, we've got a human rights problem, or I have a human rights problem? What does he do? What is the procedure? Does he go to the Attorney General, who in turn...
Well, first of all, they investigate and confirm. They have the power of investigation and so on. They have the power to go to the judiciary and initiate, and they have the power to go to investigate the police and the world executive, right? They have this power of investigation, gathering information, and if they find that the Constitution is being violated, they can bring it to the court.
You had asked me to present regarding 12 and 13, so
We didn't. Oh, I'm not going to present yet. I'm just sketching out these agencies, right? So the judiciary, world federal judiciary, the police, civilian world police, right? No military. Civilian, the Constitution says that will have only weapons necessary to apprehend individuals. The military weapons are normally weapons to hit groups, bomb groups, ground people, or whatever. They will only have weapons necessary to apprehend individuals because it's individuals worldwide that are responsible to obey world law, right? Not, in other words, we're no longer in this world where, because it's a sovereign nation, we have to bomb the whole nation in order to get rid of the leader, whatever, Saddam Hussein or whatever. None of that, right? Because every individual should be responsible to obey the law. So, civilian world police, the executive, as Laura was saying, it's unique because the executive has no police power. The police are a separate agency responsible to the parliament. Right? The executive cannot controls the world administration, but they have no power, this is right in the Constitution, to suspend the budget given to them by the World Parliament, or to block any initiatives or laws that have been given to them by the World Parliament, and they have no power to declare a state of emergency and suspend human rights or the Constitution. Right? No such power. Like in the United States, our executive branch can just suspend, if they declare a state of emergency, they can suspend their rights like that. So we want to, so this is our structure, the basic structure. And all these agencies under the World Administration are staffed by a professional worldwide civil service, which looks for professional people to, and the head of each of these departments will be someone from the World Parliament, right? So someone that's elected by the people of Earth. So that's the basic structure of the, with these qualifications, right? Only weapons to apprehend individuals, no power to suspend the government, the power to protect human rights worldwide, an effective judiciary which covers all the main branches of dispute, from disputes between nations to disputes between individuals and corporations and so on. It's the basic structure.
I just have one thing. And there's sociocracy built in taxes. There's not even one executive. There's also circles inside of there.
Yeah.
Because he's going to care about this.
Yeah,
Okay? So in the executive, there's 5 presidents.
Yeah, this is run by a presidium of
Yes.
5.
They've worked in the circles in
You
the
mean there's
square.
no world dictator?
Well,
The same police, there's 5 world
Yes,
police chiefs,
yes.
and there's 5 world attorney generals, and there's
right, so
5
there's not one guy.
ombudsmen. And the Constitution requires that these 5 be from each continent, 5 main continents of the earth. Right, so you're going to have 5, a presidium of 5 that is in charge, and they will rotate the presidency of that presidium every couple of years. Right? So everybody will have a turn.
This coincides with the 5 points on the,
Yeah,
on the peace.
on the diagram,
On the peace,
Peace
Pentagon.
Pentagon.
Peace Pentagon.
Peace Pentagon.
Yeah, peace Pentagon.
So let me just answer the question, unless you had the UN, because that was.
It's about the ombudsman function and, I mean, I think you brought up a great question about wiretapping. You were talking before about sovereign nations being able to control their circumstance, and I can easily see a circumstance where the United States says, we need to be wiretapping to protect ourselves from terrorism, and the ombudsman saying this is a violation of people's human rights. And how do you deal with those kinds of conflicts when the sovereign nation is saying, we need to do this thing?
Yeah, that's a good, and these are good questions. But the key thing, I think, to understand, and if you, I hope you'll take my free book, right, and read it and review it. The book that's available on the tables over there, that the pre-publication review copy of, because it goes into these things, right? Chapter 7 goes into the dangers of totalitarianism and why this is different. It's different because of the principle of holism. Right now we live in a world that is hopelessly fragmented. Terrorists, rebel groups, all kinds of rogue nations, including the United States, which I think is the worst rogue nation in the world, thinks of itself as exceptional and can do anything it wants, and so on. Nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction. The world is hopelessly fragmented, and people are just reacting. You know, the NSA says we have to spy on everybody, and so on. What we need to create, and what the Earth Constitution does, is create under a new paradigm in which the whole concept of power and the whole concept of people needing to struggle against state power to maintain their libertarian rights and so on will be transformed. Right? There's a long tradition in Western philosophy that talks about positive freedom. The original founders in the 18th century who said we need government, right, to represent us, to give us a fair set of due process principles and so on, and to protect our rights, those original people said they had a kind of negative freedom. We've also got to protect ourselves against government because of its intrusive capabilities. But of course, this is designed not to allow those to happen in the first place, right? But there's a tradition of positive freedom. People like T.H. Green, coming out of the writings of Hegel and so on, right down to a lot of people that I cite in that book, that says that freedom arises when people begin to cooperate with one another, right, and really communicate with one another, and no longer manipulating with diplomatic language and so on, but beginning to really say that we can empower all of us rather than working apart and struggling against each other. And that's what's behind this thing. The world police, for example, it's right there in the Constitution. One department of the world police will be conflict resolution, right? The world police, like police anywhere, are authority figures. Right? In Britain, 50 years ago, police had no guns, right? They would walk around, the bobby would walk around the streets, and people would look to the bobby as an authority figure to handle small disputes and so on. That's something that a good police force, a civilian police force, really concerned to empower people and protect them, will be doing, right? So we're changing the paradigm here. And, you know, why are terrorists terrorists? the majority of people who write about this, and I've got another chapter on this, chapter 5 of that book. Please look at it. Terrorists are people who think that they're defending themselves against oppression. Right? People, except for a few of the people that Roger counseled in prisons in California, most people, you know, they're not going to strap bombs to themselves and walk into a marketplace, right? Only, you know, you can't get rid of a few crazy people, but most terrorists are not crazy. They are angry, and they're full of misery and hatred and unhappiness. Their relatives have been killed in Iraq by the United States in its terrible oppressive policies, or by drones in Afghanistan and so on. Right? Terrorists are people who think they're fighting a war against oppression. And this is all going to disappear. The exploitation capacity of the multinational, if we have people, representations of the people of Earth, right, in not moneyed interests, but the people of Earth, and they're making laws for the Earth, they're going to control the multinational corporations. In fact, there's a whole department here for multinational corporations and their regulation and control. They're going to be under the scrutiny of the world ombudsman and the world police and so on. It's going to change. There's no military, right? None of the states have its own military force. No nation on earth will have a military. How are they going to go rogue? And they're not going to be able to secretly build bombs because, you know, there's no place to hide anymore. The whole earth is, you know, from space you can see the whole earth. And so this idea of a nation going rogue, and if you're under a new paradigm, right, and the people of that nation, North Korea say, right, they're no longer in poverty. They're no longer under an oppressive dictatorship because the Constitution doesn't allow that, right? So they're now part of a democracy. They're part of a world democracy. They're in touch with, they're no longer isolated. They're in touch with the rest of the world, and they see that poverty is being eliminated, that the Earth's environment is being protected, that they're, you know, that they're getting their share of resources. How are they going? Why are they going to have rogues, right? You only have rogues in a fragmented world system, in which, you know, North Korea says, you know, we're against everyone else. We've got to, you know, build our own weapons and so on. No, all that's going to be gone if we can join the Earth together. Now, Eugenia is going to talk about.
We've got about 10 minutes.
People, 10 minutes. So please let Eugenia answer the rest of your.
Two questions from India.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Especially from India to attend this special world conference, Transform the World for Peace and Unity. It's really something extraordinary going on. But we are restless because we want that this should be executed very fastest. This is the need of it. And we are here. We are positive jihadis. We are peace jihadis. We are ready to dedicate our services voluntarily. What we can do for this, how we can execute on this earth, this world parliament in the fastest way. This is my question.
Thank you.
Please.
Should I ask now or later?
Well, let me.
Just don't go into too much detail.
Summarize.
Your
Okay.
question.
Okay. I assume that this house is the parliament of the world now.
In a
And
sense.
we are creating.
Yes.
We are creating. So I'll start with two questions, two basic questions. At the opening ceremony day before yesterday, Glenn made a very important sentence. Does humanity have a future? I'll start from there. When I go out into the world to convince the common people, they ask me questions. So I say, humanity has no future. Then they say, why? So we need to spend a lot of time, why?
Absolutely right.
Therefore, the second question comes. What is the economic structure of the world today? I will start from there. Who owns the world? Who controls the world? Who decides about the world today? And who enjoys the world today, including us? These are the basic questions I will have to explain to the people of the world. Those 1,000 people, that's more important for me. All of the people come this. So, I will start from there. 20% to 80% equation of the world today, economic structure. Unless we destroy the existing economic structure, the 20 against 80, how do we move forward? This is how I look at economic and political question to reach the parliament that we are going to create. And this is how I would go. And I'm one with all of you in the process.
How do we address the economic structure? And what can we do? We had, just before this workshop, there was another workshop on cooperatives. And I think that the answer to this question was talked over in the cooperatives and was suggested to the group during Ajawa had the workshop on cooperatives. And between Ajawa and Bob Lane, there was sort of an answer to that, and we'll touch that in a moment. And there was I wrote down here some questions. There was a question, what is the PR plan? And there was a point about the human rights, a few brief points that I wanted to make, and then go on to that PR plan if I could. And I don't know if I'm going to answer all of the questions.
Just jump in.
5 minutes.
Got about 5
Yeah,
minutes.
5 minutes. Oh. Is this better? Does this work?
You're fine.
You're carrying.
You're fine, just.
Okay, that's good. Is this picking it up?
Yeah.
Okay. So, very briefly, back in 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt and others came together and had a meeting about for Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this was adopted partially by countries. It was not officially ratified by the U.S. Senate. And Roosevelt, she pointed out that part of the problem was that the economic rights and the political rights were mixed up together, and that it's important to have a separation because the political rights can be instantly guaranteed from the beginning. The economic rights, hey, you have to train teachers, you have to train medical personnel in order to satisfy economic rights and that sort of thing. So this is addressed in Article 12 and 13 of the Earth Constitution. Now we go on to the PR plan, and in the PR plan, what we have been doing since 1977. There has been mostly a focus on approaching the national governments of countries around the world, and a few national leaders have stood up and said, yes, this looks good for us, why don't we go forward with this? And what has happened is we found some evidence, at least strong circumstantial evidence, if not direct evidence, that after they say we want to do this, and their arms get twisted behind closed doors, and they get told, well, this is not friendly. Right? So under the Earth Constitution, there is a provision for direct popular referendum regarding the Earth Constitution. And under direct popular referendum, it's not necessary for a national government to say, yes, we like this, go to all the county electoral commissions and have the vote. We don't have to wait for that. Under Article 17.1.5 of the Earth Constitution, the people of Earth, each of us in this room, we can go with the Constitution, organize the referendums, and hopefully we will coordinate with other people as we do this, but not wait ourselves to death until somebody else starts it. So what is here, I've got not enough for everybody, but for almost everybody. So if y'all would pass these, around. And, if I could have one of those. Thank you. And these are sample ballots for referendum regarding the Earth Constitution. May I have one? Thank you. These are sample referendum ballots. They can be made in every different language, just as the Earth Constitution itself has been published has been printed in about over 20 different languages. This is Spanish, this is French, this is Italian, Arabic.
We believe you.
Okay, Japanese.
We believe you.
Okay.
Skip the languages.
Okay, so we get the languages, and the people of Earth can directly, without waiting for further authority, can coordinate and talk with other people that are interested in doing this. It does not have to be micromanaged. The Provisional World Parliament will go over recommendations for form and stuff like that will help people carry this forward. There are two different ways that it's here. This is just suggestive. These particular referendums formats are not, they're not hard and fast. It's not been handed down by some authority, but rather just based on the spirit of the Constitution itself. And Bob Blaine, I don't think Bob is in here right now. Bob Blaine pointed out that everybody ought to get paid for participating. If you participate in the referendum, whether you vote yes on this one, it's on the legal size sheet, it's strictly that it's put in terms of a yes or no on the legal size sheet. So whether you vote yes or no, or you click off that you're abstaining, you would still get paid just for participating in the
We don't have any money.
Not with,
don't go there.
Don't go there.
I mean it. Don't go there. Don't go
This,
there.
I'm not gonna, there's not time to go into explaining that further. And this is a summary of the Earth Constitution juxtaposed with a summary of the United Nations Charter. And in this form of the referendum, what people are doing is they're reading both the United Nations Charter, a summary to get the gist of the UN Charter, and the summary of the Earth Constitution for a gist of the Earth Constitution, and then they can vote between what we are saying the incumbent, the United Nations Charter, and the Earth Constitution.
This is not a referendum. The referendum question is, do we ratify the Constitution for the Federation of Earth and send a representative to the World Parliament? That's the ballot referendum question. This goes with that referendum. This is not a referendum. This is an explanation of the
Actually,
Constitution.
Under the Earth Constitution, there's a provision for voter information packets. Is under the Article 8 of the Constitution on the Integrated Complex.
This goes in the back.
And this is for parliamentary activities, voter information packets. And what this is not a parliamentary activity so much directly, but it's an information decision regarding this. And the whole thing, no, it's not a ballot. The ballot is just on the tabloid size. It's just a part where it is, there's a little dotted line and it says this part, you cut off, you vote, you put the information down. Any resident in the world can participate. You need to be at least 18 years old to cast the vote. And I think that pretty much is covering it. I don't know if we have any time for any questions on that.
We're running out of time.
Why don't you just answer briefly the question that was asked earlier about how the UN will be integrated into the Earth Constitution?
Under Article 17 of the Earth Constitution, there are provisions for how the system transitions from the old system to the new system. And that's been further addressed. It says that this will be further addressed in the Parliament. And under Article 17 of the Earth Constitution, viable agencies of the United Nations can be transferred, reconstituted, and integrated into the World Federation. So that any good work that is taking place within the United Nations, any intelligent organization that is within the United Nations could be, in spite of and beyond the UN Charter, within the context of the Earth Constitution, those agencies can be incorporated.
So you might take UNESCO, but you're not going to take the Security Council. And who decides what's viable, right?
Okay.
This is a very...
it's something that people need to talk about this, and it's a good question. Personally, we have addressed the Security Council, and we have said that the Security Council, under the Parliament has addressed it, and has said that the Security Council can meet and give advice, but the Security Council does not have any override over the Earth Constitution. Regarding UNESCO, there's not been any particular discussion in the Parliament, or not much outside of it. I personally don't see how UNESCO is viable, but it might be, and we'll see what happens.
It's a good discussion. We need to stop here because we're running out of time. We're meeting again at 1:30 in 1-6. For those of you who want to pursue this discussion, thank you very much for your attention.